Good day, everyone. It's Tuesday, April the 6th at 10 a.m. here on the West Coast. I'm Martin Gagel with Radius Research. Today, we welcome Domenic Carosa, founder and chairman of BankSA, ticker BNXA on the Venture Exchange. It's a great day to be talking with you as BankSA just announced its transaction values through the end of March, which stood at almost $80 million Australian, up 30 months just in the month of March, and up over 700% from last year. Welcome, Domenic, and why don't you start off by discussing this morning's news, and we'll do a deeper dive into the company.
Yes, certainly. Martin, thanks very much for having me on today. So we're pretty pleased with the results. We're up over almost 800% year on year for the March quarter. One of the ways that we measure the performance of the company is a measure called total transaction volume, and so that was obviously record. With March, in fact, was a record month for us, and the comment from a couple of comments from our CEO were such that we effectively had record new customer onboarding, and we've put measures in place to effectively expand our onboarding team, expand our support team in order to be able to deal with the load currently on the system, which is, as I tell the team, a very, very good problem to have. And the business just continues to go from strength to strength. And we've also added a number of B2B customers, and we now have over 60 B2B customers. And what we do will become a bit clearer over the next 20 or so minutes.
All right, thanks a lot. You're going to throw up the...
Yeah, so maybe what I'll do as a starting point, and what I'd certainly like to encourage anyone on the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to basically just type them out. I don't know where the actual Q&A button is on your screen, but there's a Q&A button. Feel free, and what I'm going to try and do is answer as many questions throughout, as well as at the end we'll have some time as well. So, and I always work on the basis that no question is a silly question. So feel free to ask. In terms of background, maybe I'll sort of start with that. Personally been involved in technology since mid-90s. Listed my first company actually on the Australian Stock Exchange in 2000, and then ran an early stage VC fund for a number of years, and got interested in the whole Bitcoin and crypto space in 2013. And one of the ways that my brain works is I need to do in order to learn. Bought some mining equipment, bought some Bitcoin, and 6 months later launched bitcoin.com.au, which is one of Australia's leading websites to sell Bitcoin, which is actually owned by BankSA. And from there, really the BankSA story unfolds, which I'll sort of get into. Maybe before I do that, just want to paint the picture. And the industry, the whole crypto market, the digital asset market is certainly now moving away from the domain of the tech nerds, and I will put up my hand and say I'm one of those, to really being the domain of the family offices, the institutions, and so it really just shows that the whole industry has grown up. And one of the other bits of news that I think most investors will be aware of is that Coinbase will be the first US-based exchange to list on NASDAQ with close to a $90 billion market cap. And I believe this will be significant, not just for Coinbase, but for the entire industry. It will really shine a light on the whole industry. And just don't take my word for it. I'm sure some of you have heard of Paul Tudor Jones, from many considered the father of the modern day hedge fund. He mid 2020, basically started buying Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation. And then obviously I think everyone knows Elon Musk, and he's gone from just being a supporter to actually owning billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin at Tesla.
Dom, sorry,
so go ahead.
And just with the expansion of it, it's like when I guess Bitcoin first became widely known in that about like 3.5 years ago. I think it was in like sort of the fall of 2017. It was a little tricky to buy Bitcoin there. You had to jump through a bunch of hurdles. It was like the early days of the internet, trying to figure out your IP stack and do all that. Now you just, with like companies like yourself, it's so easy. So I don't know, it kind of makes sense that it's just when it's a whole lot easier, you can almost buy it on a whim, or there's not a lot holding you back technically.
yeah, it's certainly easier today than it used to be, but it's still pretty challenging. It's not as easy as going down to the supermarket and buying a loaf of bread, for example. It's my view is that's ultimately mass market, and just you touched on the whole internet. If you're asking me for my view is this feels like 1997. So it's actually that early in the development of the ecosystem. And you're going to have to excuse me. I'm actually at a place where there's a bunch of hail that's just started to come down. So hopefully you can still hear me okay.
It's fine.
Um, in terms of our vision is to bring digital currencies to every corner of the globe. And how we do that, just to give you a bit of a sense, BankSA is the world's first stock exchange listed PSP payment service provider for the digital asset industry. And if you want to put us into a box, the best way to describe us is we're like the Stripe or the PayPal for the digital asset industry. And what we're effectively doing is building a bridge between the fiat world, and when I say fiat, I mean the US dollar, the euro world, with the new digital asset world, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other coins. Because for those new people that are getting involved in the space, you actually don't start with Bitcoin or Ethereum. You start with fiat cash of some sort. And so we're effectively building the payment infrastructure that connects the two. So once again, if you want to put us into another bucket, the best way to really describe the company is that we're like the picks and the shovels of the industry. And so Banks is a B2B business that is basically a highly scalable, low touch. And I'll talk more about that. And one of the most important points, which was highlighted in the announcement today, is whether the price of Bitcoin goes up or the price of Bitcoin goes down, we actually clip the ticket. And as we mentioned in the release, when the price of Bitcoin goes up, it creates an element of, let's call it FOMO, and new people enter the industry. When the price actually goes down, all the current holders jump in and buy more. And in fact, this is a really interesting point. One of the biggest days that we've ever had was when the Bitcoin price went down 5 to 10% in a day. So from that perspective, I think that's just goes to show the resilience of the platform. So what do we actually do in terms of getting to that next level of detail? And these are really four key pillars. First of all, we provide global payment infrastructure. And I say global because we obviously offer MasterCard, Visa, and Apple Pay, and then local, where we offer local payment methods. For example, Interact in Canada, SEPA in Europe, Poly in Australia. And then we wrap that with our digital asset licenses and registrations, effectively our regulatory and compliance platform. Because unlike in 2014, when we first got involved in the industry, this industry is now regulated in nature. And we do the same AML KYC checks, the same checks that you would get when you go to a broking firm or set up a bank account. It's actually that rigid from a licensing and registration perspective. And we have multiple licenses around the world. And then the third pillar is our data science automation platform. Effectively, we've built a highly scalable platform that ultimately, we say makes money while we sleep. And then, the last part of that pillar is the coin delivery, delivering that coin or that token to the customer, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, in the most efficient way possible. And, I won't get into being too geeky and talk about on and off chain, but effectively, we've got all those solutions covered. Now, the way that we work is that our customers are global exchanges and wallets. And you'll see some names there that you may recognize, like Binance, OKX, Huobi, Edge, KuCoin. And so what we do for our customers is effectively we provide an API or a payments pipe, which is just a fancy way for a connection. And we help our customers acquire new customers because we take care of the payment, all the regulations, all the local regulations, because they're different in every single country. And then we deliver that coin to the customer in the most efficient way. And so just to, I guess, unpack that, if you're a customer on Binance in Canada, just to use that as an example, you go into Binance, you're a brand new customer, you've got no Bitcoin sitting there. what you'll be able to do is either use your credit card or use Interact. By a couple of $1,000s worth of Bitcoin, we'll take you through an AML KYC process. And then after that, literally within minutes, we will deliver that coin into your wallet, ready for you to start trading, or if you want to do a BTC, ETH pair, or anything else. The way that we make
Dom,
yeah,
sorry, just
yeah,
to clarify, this is through the Binance. They're the exchange. You get my money onto the Binance platform, and then I'm on Binance where I can buy, sell, trade, or whatever with it. Correct?
Yeah, and thanks for that clarity. So we're not an exchange. We're effectively facilitating the payments in a regulated way, and what we call that the fiat on ramps. And as the name suggests, you take your fiat money and you on ramp into cryptocurrency. And the majority of our business today are fiat on ramps. We've just started testing and rolling out fiat off ramps, which means you can go from Bitcoin to cash in a particular country, because there are some, let's call it, technical challenges in doing it in a compliant fashion, which I can talk more about. And in terms of how the business makes money, we effectively clip the ticket. You drive onto our highway or you drive off and we clip the ticket. And so it's a combination of commission and spread. So that's how we make money today. And that's our model today. Moving forward, what we're going to look to do is add other products and services like interest-bearing accounts, borrowing and lending, that effectively add more value to our customers and ultimately their customers.
Dom, sorry, I just want to go back just to clarify on the business model with the commission and the spread. So on the commission, I put $1,000 into Binance through you guys, and you get $10 to $30, 1% to 3% of that going on. So I take $1,000 and $970 or $80 ends up on the Binance site.
Yeah, typically you will buy and then the commission or the spread, the commission will be actually added on top. There'll be like a commission fee, a bit like an FX broker.
Okay.
Some FX brokers break out the commission, others will include their commission in the spread. So it's a similar model.
So whenever I trade then on Binance, you get a clip of that, or is it just the one, how much ever money I load onto Binance through you guys?
Yeah, another good question. So only when you load money in,
yeah,
or with the fiat on ramps, or over time when you off ramp, that's where we clip the ticket. Because a lot of these crypto to crypto exchanges, the regulations are still, I'm going to say, fairly loose. But
yeah.
as soon as you touch fiat and try and move it into crypto, then the regulations are exceedingly clear. You need to do full AML KYC, PEP checks. I mean, I can get into all the nuances at a later point in time, but it's like opening up a broking account or a bank account. And it's different in each country. And we have multiple licenses around the world.
All right.
One of the ways that we actually measure both internally as well as communicate to the market externally how we're performing as a business is TTV, total transaction value. And this is the volume of transactions going through our platform. And what we just announced a number of hours ago is that our March quarter TTV was 205 million, which was up from 111 million the quarter before. And so what you've seen is, a good solid, increase. And, how do we drive this? We continue adding more customers. We add more payment methods. We add more coins. And it's really a function of, I guess, all the good work that the team's doing internally. In terms of the cap structure, just to give you a high level overview, we have just shy of 41 million shares on issue. There are a number of stock options, which are effectively ESOP options, which basically, in my view, significantly aligns the team with the performance of the organization. And we're listed on the TSXV, the OTCQX, as well as the Frankfurt Exchange. And there's a couple of research notes out there by Fundamental Research and RAS, which I'm happy to share with you, Martin, if you want to share them across with your webinar viewers. In terms of the, I guess, comparables, Banks is, as you can see right down there, with I think 280, 300 million market cap last time I checked. And there are other companies in the space with significantly greater market caps like Voyager. And just to be super clear, there are no absolute one-to-one comparables. We're the first payment service provider to be listed servicing crypto anywhere in the world.
What
And
about
so
on,
what, what
sir, what about private companies? Are there private companies that you compete with, or your clients or your partners, the exchanges? What are their options? They could build it themselves. They could go to you. And are there competitors that, like, who do you compete with on the
yeah,
private company side?
yeah. So our competitors are currently private. And some exchanges, some of the big exchanges will do effectively run their own fiat on and off ramps in one or two key countries, or in Coinbase's case, in 3 or 4 countries. And so some exchanges will do that, and then they'll use BankSA for the rest of the world. While we have some exchanges that just use BankSA exclusively. We have a number of competitors. One of the biggest competitors in the space is an Israeli company called Simplex. And one of the, I guess, major points of differentiation between ourselves and Simplex is that we offer almost 20 different payment methods, while they offer credit card and SEPA transactions only. And the reason that is important, and this is a really important point, why do we do all these transactions? Because ultimately it provides a better customer experience. So, for example, if you're buying $500 worth of Bitcoin and you want to use your credit card, the fees are typically 5 to 7%. They're not just our fees; that's the industry average, because credit card is inherently expensive to transact in this sector of the marketplace. While if you're using a service like Interact in Canada or Ideal in the Netherlands, the costs are calculated in pennies. And so if you're buying $500 worth, 5 to 7% isn't really material. But if you're buying $5,000 worth, you don't want to be paying all those credit card fees. That's why the local payment methods are incredibly important for our customers and ultimately our business. And the reason why other groups don't do it is because it's actually much more challenging and complicated to do that. The more payment rails you have, the more complicated the business is, and the more robust platform you need. And so the reason I bring up some of these groups out there, and we would be, in my view, more akin to Voyager. I mean, Voyager is an exchange, but more about the evolution or the development of the organization, as opposed to comparing like for like. And what I put that down to is, Voyager and the other companies listed there have been listed for many, many years. We listed on the 6th of January. So we're the new kids on the block, as they say. It's going to take us time to build awareness in North America, and it's still early days. And obviously, being on a webinar such as this one will actually help introduce more investors to the BankSA opportunity.
Dom, with when you say it's technically, or it's difficult to build these for the different payment methods, is that on a regulatory basis, or is that more on a just technical and gaining trust with the banks? And the payment process system is a very insulated, very risk averse system. So explain, and I would think that's a fairly big barrier or moat around your business. Could you maybe dig into that a bit?
I think, Martin, as I say, you've hit the nail on the head. And it is a combination of regulatory, because to go and set up, you need to set up local companies, local bank accounts, and it's easier said than done. And then there's a whole regulatory layer, compliance layer that sits over the top of that. And the reason that we've been able to win new business is because a lot of these exchanges, they look at the costs of plugging us in versus trying to do it themselves. And because we can spread effectively our costs across, at this point, over 60 customers, we can inherently do it much more cost effective than them trying to do it themselves. And so we do have a cost advantage, just purely because we have economies of scale.
All right.
In terms of the shareholders, the board and management own about 27% of the company. So we are absolutely aligned with the company. The next three investors are all institutional funds based out of Australia and Singapore. That's Allium, NGC, and Thorney. And you'll also notice that we have two of our customers, OKX Exchange and KuCoin Exchange, who also sit on our register as well. And in fact, we've got a few other exchanges talking to us about joining our register as well. In terms of some of the key catalysts for growth, and I'm not going to go through everyone, and I can see questions coming through, so keep them coming in, and we'll do our best to answer them. Is continued focus on execution while increasing our total transaction value. Secondly, is growing our B2B customer base. The universe of global exchanges and wallets are in the thousands. We've identified the top 500 in those particular areas, and right now we've got just over 60. So there's still a lot of organic growth to go into this business. And next is continue to add more payment options in new countries or territories like Latin America, Asia, Africa, as well as adding more coins. We're just about to add a whole bunch of new coins onto our platform. And I haven't even touched on the whole DeFi and NFT space. If there are any questions around it, and I'll be happy to answer it. And I think ultimately much more consumer interest and acceptance and investor acceptance of the whole sector. This is still so embryonic, and I'll tell you a funny story. The other day I was watching something on YouTube, and it was from 1996. It was like one of those morning NBC programs, and they had this computer sitting there, and the hosts are basically talking about, there's this new thing called the internet, and you can send email, and they're saying, well, who would want to send email? I can just send a letter and it gets to the person. And so to me, that actually just made me laugh, because imagine trying to tell someone today, go and send a letter instead of actually going and sending an email or using the myriad of messaging applications. And we are still so early in the development of that ecosystem. It's like 1997. In terms of the board, so board and management, obviously I've spoken about myself. Our next three directors, Matt Kane, Doron Cohen, and Jim Landau, between the three of them, have got over 50 years of public company and technology experience, led by our CEO, Holger Arians. And as you can maybe tell, he's a German national. And as I like to say, he runs the company with German precision, and he's doing an excellent job. And then we have Konstantin, who's ex-EY, as our CFO, Josh, our GM, ex-EY, and then Ian Clark as our CTO, ex-Goldman Sachs, rounds out the team. So that's kind of really, let's call it a high-level overview of the business. And maybe at this time would be a good opportunity to take questions.
Do you want me to read some of them out, or you want to read them off for yourself? How do you want to structure?
No, that's okay. I've got the list here, so I'm happy to sort of read them out. And Tony asks, are you doing anything to improve the speed of BankSA crypto to fiat conversions? How does BankSA then compare relative to other converters in the space? So right now, and this is actually an interesting point. So if you look at our, hopefully you can still see the TTV graph, 98% of that TTV was made up of fiat on-ramp as opposed to fiat off-ramp. We are just turned it on for one country, and that's Australia, for a number of reasons. We're testing the off-ramp. And in terms of the speed, literally, you send us the coin, you complete the compliance regulatory process if you haven't done it before, and then within minutes, the money will be sitting in your bank account. So it's a very quick service, but there are, let's call it a number of regulatory challenges as well, and that's why it will take a little bit longer. And if someone asks, will this double our TTV? the honest answer is no, it won't double our TTV. It may add another 30 to 50% as we turn on our fiat off ramps. And the reason is today that most people are getting into the ecosystem as opposed to cashing out. Once the system and the ecosystem is much more mature, then I believe that there'll be a much more equilibrium between fiat on ramp and fiat off ramps. So hopefully, Tony, I've answered your question.
On the off-ramp, Dom, if let's say I loaded the money onto the exchange via credit card, can I get it back sort of deposited onto the credit card, or do you have to get a bank account then to sort of divert it to that?
We're actually testing that functionality as we speak, because by being able to off-ramp onto a credit card, it's basically universal, because
Yeah.
most people around the world have got a credit card and not everyone has got a bank account. Even if they've just got a debit card. So that's part of what we're going through in testing in terms of the off ramps. And progressively over the next 9 months, we will turn on the off ramps on a country by country basis.
All right. I'm going to jump in and ask a question here, if you don't mind. Could you talk, you've raised some money recently. Could you just talk a little bit about your balance sheet and then also your cost structure? I would presume you've got a pretty fixed cost structure, and like how much revenues or transaction value, how, like, as you build out the base, like how much revenue then falls down to the bottom line into cash flow?
Yeah, certainly. So the model has a high degree of leverage. At the end of December, we had just over $10 million in cash. We just announced just another 13 million capital raising, which we're just in the process of completing over the next couple of days. So we'll have well over $20 million of cash. So quite a strong balance sheet to allow us to get on and do all the things that we need to do. We released our December quarter numbers. And if you strip away the IPO related costs, given that we just listed early January, the business made a very small EBITDA profit. It was just under 100,000 based upon 111 million TTV. Just to be super clear, our objective in the short term over the next 12 to 18 months is actually not to make profits. The objective is to take any profit that we make and reinvest it back into the business, because the beauty of this model is whether we're doing 200 million a quarter or 2 billion a quarter, the cost base is relatively fixed, other than adding more people from an onboarding perspective and customer service, because I'm a strong believer of providing fanatical support to our customers, and obviously just adding further to the number of coins and the number of payment methods. And so, this is a growth industry, it would be remiss of us to focus on profitability. We've got a strong enough balance sheet that allows us to, I'll put my Australian hat on and say, go for gold. And so my view is, there's no reason why we can't be doing $2 billion a quarter. And at that point, the business becomes highly profitable.
Right.
Now, Sam asks, presumably access to markets for BankSA is dependent on regulatory approval in each country, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, I know you're big in Australia. What about extending your customer base in North America, Canada, and the US? Thank you, Sam, for your question. So we started in Australia. We got one of the world's first licenses anywhere. Australia was actually the second country in the world behind Japan to issue licenses. We work with a partner in the US. We have a license in Canada, and we operate across Europe and the UK as well. And we're now continually adding new licenses as part of our ecosystem. Jerry asks, one of the big concerns is the timing for deposits transfers with certain exchanges. What is BankSA doing to make sure that transfers are done efficiently, with the increased volumes of transactions? And so that's a good point. And there's certainly an element of people wanting their coins, and they wanting those coins quickly. Most of our transactions, I can't remember the specific number, but it was close to 90%, are literally done within I think it was within a sort of a 60-minute from start to finish, you'd get that coin. And in fact, most of it was done within 20 minutes. But there'll be some payment methods globally that will settle overnight. And obviously we can't send that coin to the customer until we know that we've received those particular monies. And I think the other point that, or question that Jerry says, well, what happens if there is congestion in the Bitcoin network or the Ethereum network? And that can slow things down when there's a lot of volume going through. And this is, I guess, part of our secret sauce that I can sort of maybe touch on here. Point 4 in terms of the pillar, which is the coin token delivery platform that looks at what is the fastest, most efficient way to get the coin to the customer. And it could be, and this is maybe a good chance to answer the, let's call it the on and off chain. So with certain global exchanges, we will take the coin from their exchange and deliver it to the customer. So that transaction actually happens what is called off-chain. In the equity world, it would be akin to a dark pool. And so we can do that in a very cost-effective manner for the customer. It means it's almost instantaneous for the customer. They don't need to wait, effectively for the blockchain to catch up. Frank Wu asks, after you sign 200 agreements with exchanges, what's next in terms of moving forward? So first of all, Frank, we have a target of 500 exchanges and wallets, and that's only the wallets and the exchanges that we know about today. Give it another couple of years and there'll be more exchanges and wallets out there. I briefly touched on the whole DeFi space and the NFT space. We've only just started servicing customers in the DeFi space because right now, I don't know if anyone has actually tried to enter the DeFi space, but it is very complicated. You've got to go from Bitcoin to Ethereum, or you need to take your Bitcoin and then you do a wrap BTC. And for most people, this is just that I've already lost most of the people when I started talking about that. So what we're doing is starting to cater our fiat on ramp so you can go straight from fiat to a DeFi coin without having to be a technical genius. And the same goes for NFTs as well. And so Frank, in answering your question, I think when we get to 400 or 500 exchanges and wallets, the universe will expand, and our focus in terms of our target for the universe will also expand. Sam asks, what do exchanges like Binance prefer to partner with BankSA rather than facilitating the payment themselves? And there will be, as we mentioned earlier, Sam, there'll be some exchanges that do some of it themselves and then will use us for some of the other countries. And then there'll be other exchanges that use us exclusively. But if you were to say, what's the average, an exchange would work with 2 partners because you always want to have some redundancy there. And so in that respect, we are typically one of 2 on an average basis. Sam also asks, competition to PayPal has started allowing their customers to buy with crypto. Is that a threat or not? And the answer is, I absolutely welcome that. Anything that helps increase people's perception and interest in Bitcoin or Ethereum and other coins is actually really good for the ecosystem. And I think what PayPal is doing, I don't know if anyone's tried to even buy with PayPal. You can buy it and you can only keep it in the actual ecosystem. You can't talk about anything else. You can't really take it out. You can only buy it and sell it. Jerry asks, can you talk about some of the competition in the payment space? Are they exclusive contracts? And can they go out and use new competitors? Typically, our contracts are non-exclusive. I mean, that's just the nature of the industry. We've touched on Simplex. There's a couple of companies in the space like Simplex. And maybe I can sort of take a step back. Part of the reason that we decided to list the company wasn't just to be able to go out there and raise capital to grow our business even faster, but it's also the credibility that comes from being a listed company because of the independent board, quarterly reporting, audited accounts. And we know that this bodes well for our customers, the regulators, and the banks that we work with. And so I know today that we have won business from our competitors because we actually are listed. And I think that's a major selling point for customers that we work with. Sam asks, I've read elsewhere that the listing on the TSX was due to planning that helps us uplist on the NASDAQ. Was that a factor in our decision? Um, I think the answer is, Sam, uh, we need to crawl before we walk. We still have a lot of work to do at BankSA. But if you were asking me personally where I believe BankSA ultimately belongs, my view is BankSA ultimately belongs on NASDAQ. And one of the many reasons why we chose the TSXV is it's a great stepping stone for companies like us. And once we're listed on the TSXV for a period of 12 months, there is what I call it a fast track process. There's maybe a different name that they use that allows us to go from being listed on the TSXV to NASDAQ without having to spend millions of dollars in fees. And so that's one of our, one of the many reasons why we decided to list. Sam asks, your revenue of 1 to 3% on the ticket, is that always in fiat? Yes, it is, because we go from fiat to Bitcoin. We're effectively taking the fiat. When we go off ramp, then our revenue will be taking a percentage of the Bitcoin, so to speak. Derek asks, can you expand upon your strategic purpose of holding Bitcoin on the balance sheet, et cetera, et cetera? I think we just, frankly, that was opportunistic. We actually do use some of that as inventory on the balance sheet. As you would have seen at the end of December, we certainly had some coins on the balance sheet, which have thankfully grown in value. So we're certainly very happy with that. And in Derek, what other countries are we currently pursuing licenses? Unfortunately, I'm not really at liberty to talk about that, just purely because it would give our competitors, let's call it, information on where and what we're up to next. So there are certain things that I can talk about, and there are certain things that I need to, let's call it, keep close to our chest, because we don't want anyone else in the industry to talk about it. Carter De Jong asks, actually, what would be a good way to get a job at BankSA? Go to LinkedIn. I mean, we've got jobs being advertised all the time, so I can't really talk about the specific jobs at this point.
Dom, how many, speaking of jobs, how many employees does BankSA have right now? And is everything sort of insourced, or do you outsource some of your development or your customer service to other places?
Most of it is insourced. I think the last time I checked, I think there was 60 or 70 people, but we're just adding new people all the time. New people are in the customer service team, specifically around onboarding and compliance, just because we've had such a strong influx of new customers. We are adding from a technical perspective, just to further improve our platform, to add more coins, as well as payment methods.
Dom, and then sort of going back to 2 questions ago and talking about what new markets are going to enter, can you say what are the major markets that you're not currently in at this point?
Yep. So it would be, maybe I'll answer that question by telling you what would be the core currencies. So 80% of our TTV is made up of USD, Canadian dollars, Euro, GBP being Great British Pounds, and Australian dollars. So that's roughly 80%. The rest comes from other currencies, and we effectively are looking for further expansion plans in Latin America, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East.
All right.
Jerry asks, I understand that BankSA owns Bitcoin.ca. Yes, we do, as well as bitcoin.co.uk and bitcoin.eu and a whole bunch of Bitcoins. We're not going to set up our own exchange. And so the plan here, like what we've done in Australia, is that we will use let's call it the SEO that organically comes from owning such a premium domain name like bitcoin.ca. We'll do some basic SEO to drive people, and then BankSA in the back end will provide that payment infrastructure for what we call an instant buy. And so we're not going to be an exchange because that would be competing with our customers. And in fact, we've got some of our customers wanting to advertise on our Bitcoin sites for exchange services. So there will be a, you'll hear more about that in the second half of this year. Suffice to say that we have been, just inundated, as you can see from the TTV growth. It's just been a very, very strong and focus on growth and organic growth, and so we've just been adding to the team just to be able to keep up. Sam asks, when clients off ramp, is the longer term aim to keep the crypto or a portion of it? Sam, it's hard for me to answer that question. I mean, that's more for our CFO and our treasury function. Suffice to say, where we see opportunities in the space, we may decide to keep a portion of it, like I know a lot of other companies in the space are doing. And then Richard asks, what is your cash burn rate? So from an operational cash flow, if you take the December quarter, because I can't talk about the March quarter P&L or balance sheet yet, because we'll be announcing that over the next 6 to 8 weeks. But if you take the December quarter results, and you'll basically see from a pure operational perspective, which excludes the buying of inventory, and you'll notice that we bought many millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and the increase in accounts receivable, which is effectively working with the payment gateways, which is because we typically work on a T+2 if you strip that out, on a pure operational basis, the business is operationally positive. And just coming back to my earlier comment around EBITDA, excluding public company costs, we made 100 grand. Now, as I mentioned, that's not really the end game. The end game for us is to continue building out our total transaction volume. And at that point, a business goes from being a growth business to a let's call it harvesting type business, and we're not there yet. This industry is growing so quickly, and one of the other major trends that I have already started seeing, and that will continue to see, will be consolidation in the sector. And one of the questions that I usually get is, well, what's the M&A strategy? How do you see this playing out over the next 3 to 5 years? And I think the best way to kind of answer that is, in this fairly new industry, there will undoubtedly be consolidation. The fact that we're listed gives us optionality, either whether or not we want to be the consolidator or the consolidatee. And if we were to be the consolidatee, who would be the natural buyers for the company? And I like to put them into 2 key buckets. One, I think would be and I'm just going to go to this slide, one of our customers. And I'm not going to talk about who or anything else, but if I put my M&A defensive hat on, if you're a big exchange, what would you want to do? You actually want to own the upstream rails that effectively add value to your business. So what you want to do, you want to go and add a payment service provider. And we've seen these kind of tactics in other industries. You go and buy someone like a BankSA, you keep the payment rails for yourself, and you turn them off for everyone else. And I know we've seen this in other verticals. So that's kind of like one bucket. I'll say it's the crypto natives wanting to consolidate the sector. And the other bucket would be the more traditional financial institutions that want to get a foothold into this sector, or the traditional payment service providers that want to get involved in the sector. And for them to try and replicate what we've done, will take many, many years and many millions of dollars. And so what typically happens at scale is that you'll typically, as an organization, want to buy as opposed to try and build. And so that would be my second bucket when it comes to, who would BankSA be attractive to longer term. Suffice to say, right now, maybe this is another Australian sort of comment, but we say head down, bum up. I'm not sure if which is basically, we've got a lot of work to do. Let's continue focusing on building the business. We've got a lot of opportunity there. continue adding more customers, continue adding to our support team and our infrastructure that allows us to provide fanatical support to our customers and ultimately provide a really good customer experience. So hopefully I've answered everyone's questions.
Dom,
And
just could
yeah,
I, if I could on your burn rate, you're roughly break even, call it right now, and you're clearly guiding that you're not a cash flowing company. You're focused on the growth. But should investors expect you to be roughly in that break even zone, maybe a little positive, maybe a little negative, or is there a risk that you could start really spending to grow the business and that burn could get bigger?
yeah, I don't think we're going to have ridiculous burn. I mean, I guess I've, originally, as you can tell from my accent, originally from Australia, we take maybe a bit more conservative approach when it comes to burn. And so my view is, steady as she goes, and there'll be certain investments that we need to make in the business that may necessitate some burn, but we've got a strong enough balance sheet to be able to comfortably do that without having to go back to the market for a very, very long time. And so my view is, you know, our TTV continues to grow, so our revenue continues to grow, and so any profit that we make, we will reinvest that back into the business. So it's going to be a combination of, we may be operationally cash flow positive one quarter, negative another, but if you're asking me what's the objective, and where do I think we can get to over the next couple of years, I don't see any reason why this 200 million from the March quarter can't be a couple of billion, like 2 billion. Um, the infrastructure is there. It's just about adding more customers, more B2B customers, and we've currently got 63 and expanding them to 500. And so, I'll let people extrapolate to say, okay, we've got 63 customers now. What would it look like if we've got 500 customers? What would that do to the TTV? And there are a couple of research reports that are out. I'm not sure, Martin, if you're able to, if I send them to you, that you can share them with your followers, but I'm happy to do that, or maybe you've got your own sort of views on on the company and research as well.
Well, yeah, I could probably send it out to the. I've got an attendee list, so I could push that out to them. Is it available on your website?
No, it's not. I'll send it to you separately, and then you can share it with anyone who wants a copy of the research report. It's a fundamental research.
All
They
right,
they produce a report which they've made public, but I'll send it to you for ease of use.
all right, all right. So are you good with the questions that we've gone through there?
Yep. Yeah, no, that's Richard asks, and you're welcome, mate, in answering your questions. I mean, that's what I'm here for. I'll do my best. What are the biggest risks or competitive threats, and do you plan on getting listed on Nasdaq? Um, I think one of the biggest, and it's not just isolated towards our organization. It's how do we keep and retain really good people? And I think this is one of the challenges for any fast growing organization. And this is, there wasn't one reason why we listed. There were many reasons why we listed. And I'm just going to pull up this capital structure side. So the team owns just shy of 10% of the company. What does that mean when psychologically they walk into the office every single day, or turn on their computer every morning? They think and they feel like they are an owner of an organization. And in my view, when you go to the office or turn up for work with that mindset, the way that you act internally, the way that you interact with our customers will be fundamentally different than if you don't have that equity. And so that's one of the I guess biggest opportunities that being public has allowed us to do, and that is to sharing the wealth and the upside for our team. And that actually makes me really happy because I think if we look after our team, ultimately the team will look after the customers, and the customers will look after our revenue and our profits longer term. That's just a philosophy that is really important to me. And Richard, in answering your last question, when do we plan to get it listed on Nasdaq? The next 12 months, or let's call it the rest of this calendar year, we're listed on the TSXV. We just recently listed on the OTCQX, which means anyone in the US can buy our stock. And we're also listed on Frankfurt. I don't want to put a time on it. Suffice to say, it is something that I constantly review. We're not there yet. After 12 months of being listed on the TSXV, we can do, as I mentioned earlier, the fast track process, which will allow us to list on NASDAQ without spending millions of dollars of fees, and also get an exemption to things like Sarbanes-Oxley for 5 years. So there are a number of benefits from going down this particular path. And so we've, as I said, we've still got a lot of work still ahead of us. And and as usual, love to keep everyone posted and updated. And feel free to to reach out to Martin and myself anytime.
All right, Dom, thank you very much. And that was very interesting and enlightening, and all the best. And maybe we can talk again in the future and get a bit of an update. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Martin, and thanks for everyone for joining the webinar.
Cheers.
Cheers.